there was a poll quite recently which showed that the broadcast media, not the print media, the broadcast media has seen a sort of collapse in confidence, from the public. Something like 29-30% of people. This is a broadcast-wide thing, is it not, Charles? I mean, the BBC, as I say, we have to pay for it. I suppose we don't have to watch Sky, but frankly, when I watch Sky, I feel that I'm in an alternate universe sometimes.
Yes, you're right, and I think this has driven some of the broadcasters a bit crazy, and they think that, and it's also because they don't understand social media, so they're very preoccupied with how they're going down on social media. To obviously you need to think about that, but they somehow take that the volume of that as being representative of the whole country, which it isn't. It's not representative of the people who follow social media, and it's even less representative of all the people who don't follow social media. And this means that they don't actually quite know what they're supposed to be doing. They're sort of whoring after the things that are hardest to get, like, for example, young viewers, and all the people who pay for them, who are old viewers, are sitting there getting annoyed. And what the most common thing I get from my Telegraph and Spectator readers is there are plenty of complaints about bias, but even more than that, the most common thing of all is a complaint that I just don't want to hear this anymore. Yeah. I don't want to see it anymore. I just find it too aggressive and miserable and uninformative. And so I'm actually just not going to watch it. I can find out more detailed facts online. I can read magazines or newspapers. I might pick up a few short bulletins, but essentially, I'm not going to put up with this. It's just making me miserable to know, and I'm not getting better informed.
Yes. That is something that we hear more and more, is it not? That basically, if you want to keep your sanity, basically stay away from it.
Well, all we see on the BBC and across the broadcast media is this assumption that the person being interviewed is a liar and they have to be caught out and there's got to be a gotcha moment. Everyone wants to be a Paxman. Paxman used to be an exception to the rule, and now it seems everybody wants to be a Paxman. Now, someone like Andrew Neil, I think, is perfect because we all know that he's right-wing, but that's only visible if you watch him on Twitter. If you see him when he's broadcasting for the BBC, he is faultlessly impartial and he will give each side an equally tough time. And his style of interviewing is excellent during the run-up to an election, for example, or during conference season. But there is no need to have that style of interrogation year-round through every single news channel and in every interview. That's why this type of forum, where everybody actually has a chance to speak, to elaborate and expand upon their views, is far more useful. And if you read the comments under YouTube discussions where you've had controversial columnists, you'll see many people saying, gosh, I actually never liked this person, but now that I've heard them elaborate and expand on their views for 10 minutes, I really enjoyed them. And I agree with them, whereas on the news, you'll only have a 20-second soundbite.
Charles, you want?
Yes, I think that's a very good point, but one thing I would add to what Raf's saying is that the whole business about tweeting, I actually think Andrew Neil shouldn't tweet like that, and nor should all these other people, because what's changed is that the performers on the BBC do regard themselves as individual performers. This has been mentioned already, but it's very important, rather than servants of the BBC. So they're always trying to increase their profile, and that includes masses of tweeting, and they don't exert on those tweets the same discipline as they are supposed to exert, and sometimes do exert, on their performances on television. So it's a bit like working for a public service like the BBC ought to be like being a clergyman used to be, where they'd say, if you can't do it in a dog collar, you can't do it. In other words, you are a full-time clergyman, and in the same way, you ought to be, if you're a BBC employee, that's sort of quite a sacred duty, and it's not regarded as that. So it's a series of ego trips. And that, I think, partly explains the Emily Maitlis performance on Newsnight that we began with, because she knows she's on a program that very few people watch now, but she is very famous. So what she was able to do was increase her fame riding on the BBC and uncontrolled.
Absolutely. No, I agree. I agree 100% with that, and I certainly wasn't in any way saying that I approve of Andrew Neil's tweeting on those matters. But actually, it was part of BBC's deliberate policy. Richard Moseley, the former head of news at the BBC, said that the BBC wanted news presenters to become personalities and to actively engage on social media. But the problem is, once you try to put your personality across on social media, your bias comes through. Now, I happen to side more with Andrew Neil's bias than Emily Maitlis's, so I prefer his tweets. But that's absolutely correct. And as you were saying, it goes far beyond the news media into the wider culture. For example, who of us knew how Tommy Cooper or Morecambe and Wise would have voted, or what their political stance was, or Bob Monkhouse? We didn't know, and the whole nation enjoyed those comedians. You could say the same thing for Hugh Grant and Steve Coogan in the 1990s. They were adored by the nation because that was pre-social media. Now we know what their views are. Suddenly the nation's divided, and suddenly half the nation, or more than half the nation, can't enjoy those BBC panel shows and comedy programmes. I certainly can't watch Steve Coogan now without thinking constantly that he detests half of the nation and regards them as fools and imbeciles.
Well, yes, I think that's a very good point. It's like if you take Have I Got News for You, for example. I don't really watch it now. Partly because, as you say, Rafe, I feel that they would disapprove of me. Do you know? They would disapprove of my views. And therefore, how can you laugh at somebody when they do that?